and you're not even looking at the like objective data to try to figure out like what happened here. How did this get started? I've never heard anyone other than you and a few other people online even discuss the 2014 coup.
Yeah. No, it's interesting because the narratives kind of change. And one of the things that's interesting about the Maidan revolution is that, and like I've played the last couple times we've been here, we played clips of like what people were saying at the time. And at the time, there were several people who were basically admitting what's going on. And they're like, yeah, we're stealing Ukraine away from Russia. Ha, ha, ha. Gideon Rose laughing with Stephen Colbert.
Right.
There's Senator Chris Murphy. He was one of the guys who was very involved in it. And he went to Ukraine several times during when the revolution was first starting. And but he was kind of the young guy. Like it was him and John McCain and Victoria Nuland, and then Chris Murphy was kind of this younger senator. And he just said the quiet part out loud on a C-SPAN interview back then, where he goes, "Oh yeah, it was American policy that overthrew Yanukovych. That was our policy that led to him. Without us, he wouldn't have been overthrown." And so but now it's like they would admit it then. But now when you talk about it, they're like, "Oh no, that's not helpful to the narrative. So don't mention that we were involved in overthrowing a government that was more pro-Russian and putting in a government that was more pro-West, because that complicates this thing." It reminds me of like there were these pieces in the 90s where there was like mainstream media outlets covering the dynamic of Al-Qaeda and terrorism in the Middle East, and they would just like bluntly just say like, "Oh, they hate us because of our military presence in the Middle East. That's his grievance with us." Just like, that's the news. That's why bin Laden hates us. No one was going, they hate us because we're free, because that just hadn't been said yet,
right.
And that wasn't until after 9/11. But then after 9/11, it was they hate us for our freedom. And now if you were to make the point that they hate us for our foreign policy, it's like, well, where did you get that from? That's insane. It's like, but you all admitted that just only a few years ago. You were openly talking about it. And so it's kind of like that. That narrative doesn't help serve the war party. So now that has to be kind of like in the dustbin of history. That never happened. The conflict started in 2022 when Vladimir Putin invaded. He was totally unprovoked. There was no other reason. It's just that he's a madman. He's bad guy. We're good guy. That's the conflict. That's the tunnel vision you're always supposed to think of war through. And that's rarely, if ever, the case. It's always more complicated than that. And then as soon as you start saying things, which believe me, from the last two podcasts here, I've heard a lot of people, "Oh, you're spewing Russian propaganda, you're pro-Putin," because as soon as you start going, well, look, this guy had some legitimate grievances. We did a lot to provoke him. And that all of a sudden means you're like on their side. Because you're no longer, we're good guys, he's bad guys. I'm like, no, actually, there's a lot of bad guys involved in this conflict.